John. It's really great to finally see each other in person, so to speak. It's a real honor for me.
Good to be here, Terry. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Growing up in Newcastle, England, how do you think that the city and the environment that you guys live in affected Raven's sound?
I think it affected it greatly. You're a product of your upbringing and your surroundings, and that all played into it, We were pretty insular in that Paul Bowden, the kid who started the band with us, his sister kind of played drums and had a drum kit. We didn't really know anyone else that played. So when we were at school, we were the only band at school.
When you guys were starting out, were there many other heavy metal bands in Newcastle?
There were a few, but when we started to play the pub circuits and the working men club circuit, it appeared that nearly all the bands that we ran into were either hokey rock bands or they were trying to be the Eagles. There was Axe, who turned into Fist, who were also on Neat, who were, they were in South Shields, all of 12, 13 mile away. So that was like on another planet, And the Tigers of Pantang, they came up maybe 78. So I think we played a show with them in 78. There was a band called the King Crabs who were famous for the singer beating people up. He ended up being a famous actor and singer called Jimmy Nail on the TV. But never actually saw them. And of course, when I was at school, there was a poetry reading and they had a guitarist and bass player. A friend at the time, this girl, said, look, there's Sting, because he plays in this band, Last Exit, a jazz band, and he had his rugby shirt on, black and yellow, which is why they called him Sting, because he lived in it,
Wow.
So I do remember that.
How far would you travel within the UK?
Maybe a 50-mile radius. And when we started playing the working men's clubs, most of them were south of Newcastle. There was a few we did further north. There's a town called Ashington, about 10 mile north of here, up on the coast.
Neil Marshall, the director of Dog Soldiers and The Descent, he was born in Newcastle.
Oh, wow. And also Alien.
Ridley Scott.
He's from South Shields, which is, literally just down the way, like 6 or 7 mile away. Yeah.
So speaking of Newcastle, how did the first record deal with Neat Records that was based in Newcastle, how did that come together?
Well, we were playing, it was a gig right in Newcastle. It's a little music hall, tiny little stage, wonderful place called Bambra's. And we played once with the Tigers at Pantang. So they turned up with their manager and watched the show. And the guy, Tom Noble, came up to us afterwards and said, hey, we just put a single out on Neat Records. How would you guys like to do a single? And we're like, let me think about it, yeah. And that was the game changer for us, because being here in Newcastle is 250 mile away, at least from London. The entire music business was locked in London. So the fact that there was a local studio really who branched out and had a label, this label was initially just used for working men's little club bands to have a record to sell at the club. Tigers of Pantang and then Fist and then us, yeah.
The new wave of British heavy metal, which I know is kind of a trendy name or term and stuff, but obviously it describes a certain period of time. Did you actually feel it happening, or because you were already in it, it just felt the same as before? Did you feel like a movement at all?
A little bit of both. It was a New Year's party in 1979 on the other side of the river in Gateshead, and I walked home. One of the few times ever I had this vision. This is going to be a great year for the band. I just know it is. It really is. And we'd been saying that for 6 years prior, this is the year of the band, and all that nonsense. But it really did happen. Well, of course, the Neat thing happened, and you could see in the papers was, Iron Maiden and Samson and Angel Witch. And it was like, wow, there's other bands around the country doing this kind of stuff. And wouldn't it be great to get a deal? And how would that work out, since we're on Mars, basically? And we kind of dodged around that by the Neat thing. When the Tigers did their single, they were very smart and sent a copy down to Sounds. Now, Sounds was a weekly newspaper for music. There was 3 of them in England at the time, at least 3. And that was the one that was more partial to rock.
Was Kerrang in existence yet?
Not exactly, kind of at the same time. When we put our first single out, I think Crown came out like almost simultaneously.
Wow.
So we were mentioned in the first Crown.
Wow.
So it had probably come out like maybe a month after our first single. So I'm guessing, I don't know, July, August of 1980. Our first experience really of doing any kind of tour, a band called The Motors, who'd had a hit single. They were kind of punk, but not really. They were jumping on that bandwagon. We opened for them at Newcastle Mayfair. Basically, they wouldn't even let us use the PA. And then we played for opening for the Stranglers. And then we played 4 dates with Ozzy Osbourne on the first Blizzard of Oz tour. And the band were great, but the crew were horrible to us. You know, they treated us like, dirt, sucked it up. And it was like, if we ever get ourselves in a position where people are opening up for us, we're not going to treat them anything like this. That's for damn sure.
Yeah,
and that kind of went in the bank and gained interest, you know. We had a few experiences after that. Like we played with Motorhead on a couple of shows and their crew was cool. You know, the bands are usually great. Yeah. And we played with Whitesnake and their crew was cool.
You know what I find? You know what I find a lot of times is I find that even with actors and people that active in my movies, I find that the people who are more established, bigger name, more well known, usually treat you better than the ones who are trying to make it, that have they're nobodies.
Bit broad brush, but yeah, you can run into that where, you know, egos, which are, you know, unentitled egos. Get you know, people try to throw around weight which they don't have and haven't earned yet. Like if we have a band opening for us, there's a little bit of a, okay, let's all sit down, we're all in this together, and you know, we expect you guys to do X, Y, Z. We will do A, B, C, and you know, any questions, let's all meet in the middle, because it doesn't work unless we all work as a team. The fans, I mean, that's something the fans notice. If you've ever been to a show and watched a band on stage where 2 guys in the band want to kill each other, and you see the daggers, all of a sudden the atmosphere flips from a good time to that, oh my God, there's going to be a fight break out. You know, a flight or fight gets into your head.
You know where I saw something like that happen one time was I was at Akron, Ohio, at the Rubber Bowl, watching the Monsters of Rock. This was in 1980. I'm going to say 88.
That was Van Halen.
Yes.
Scorpions,
yes.
Dokken,
yes.
Metallica, Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come. Yeah, so Metallica opens it up before Dokken, and then Dokken comes on the stage. And I was a big fan of George Lynch. So I'm looking at the stage, and George and Don's relationship has always been talked about in the press. And I'm sitting there watching these 2 guys play, and they don't really have any kind of camaraderie on the stage. And as I'm looking off to the side, I could see members of, you remember the band Black and Blue? Black and Blue members with the singer Jamie St. James and the guitarist who's now in Kiss.
Right.
They're sitting on the side watching, and you could see them talking about, look, these 2 guys are going to have a fight.
I remember that because, you know, Metallica went out doing their thing like a gang and went down a storm, and Dokken came out and it was just like dour.
Yeah.
Jeff Pilson's the one guy going, yeah, rock and roll, let's get into it. And the other 2 looked like they just clocked in for the night at his factory, you know, it was dreadful.
Looking back at your debut album, Rock Until You Drop, what comes to mind now when you think about it? You know, where did you record it? How long did you take to make that album? When you think back to that first initial album, what's your thoughts?
It really summed up who we were. This was exactly how we wanted it to be presented. This is what we were. And it showed there was areas for growth and little things that were different within the songs. They weren't all the same. There was some variety, but overall it was a kick-ass metal band. It was recorded at Neat, which was actually Impulse Studios in Wallsend, which is, like I say, like 4 or 5 miles east of here, which was set up in an old, it was actually an old theatre. The whole thing was set up in the dressing rooms. So there was ground floor up to the first set of dressing rooms, up to the next, and up to the next was all that. the other part of the building. They'd blocked off the auditorium, put a fake ceiling in. It was a bingo parlor. So it was very bare bones. It was a 16-track thing. They had one echo unit and one reverb unit. That was your outboard gear. And you can hear most of those neat albums or singles, every band had a song that ended with down, 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 because of the cheap-ass freaking echo unit, you know?
So then we move on to your second album, which was my first with Raven, Wiped Out. To me, you guys created one of your best tracks to date, which is To the Limit, to the Top. And the reason why I feel it's one of your best is the incredible musical journey you guys take over the 8-minute running time. And to be really specific, to me, it's those softer slow down moments that kind of set up the heavy, faster moments to have more impact. And I don't know why a lot of times some of the heavier bands don't do that more often, because I look at it kind of like as a filmmaker. If you want to have a scene with a really pretty, sexy girl, if you put her in a room with a bunch of pretty, sexy girls, you can't really see she's a pretty, sexy girl because they're all pretty and sexy. So you got to have that contrast. And what I liked about that song, it wasn't so much the length, even though I love that, it was the journey you guys took where you slowed down and then got heavy and then got fast. And the bass lines you play and the way Mark, your brother Mark Gallagher on guitar expresses himself, I thought that was brilliant, really.
No, I appreciate that. No, I love that track. And the funny thing about it is the part in the middle that's in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like what, it's like 6, 8 or whatever. And we stopped and went, okay, what do we do now? So we, let's break for lunch, come back, wrote the rest of the song and finished it. It goes, okay, we'll do the melody that I've got on the classical guitar piece, 2021. We'll take that melody that was played at the end of it, put that in, I'll play 8-string bass underneath it. And then, we'll revisit the beginning of the song with a big open cold chord thing with a little bit of extra stuff in, and then come back for the last verse, and out we go. It's a measure of how tight and how much we were clued into each other, that ESP thing. I mean, that section that we're talking about there, the 6/8 or whatever it is, that whole thing with the guitar solo is totally live, one take, all three playing at once. You hear him go, da diddle diddle da 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 diddle diddle da da, and I go, oh yeah, and I start copying him, and then we come out of it, and it's just stream of consciousness, and it just worked out so well. We had a few songs like that we actually wrote on the spot, but that whole project with Wiped Out and the songs that were on the Crash Bang Wallop EP took 6 days to record, mix, the whole deal.
Wow.
It was crazy.
That's insane.
Because the first album was done in fits and starts, 2 or 3 days here, a day there, spread out over 6 or 7 months. Really, we only got odd time when somebody else wasn't in. This time it was blocked and we did our whole thing.
Wow, that's incredible considering how good it is. And now to go to your third album, All for One, which to me is an undisputed heavy metal masterpiece. I thought you guys really upped your game. But the thing that sticks out the most to me, and probably other fans as well, is the dramatic improvement of the production and recording. To me, it's light years beyond your first 2 albums, and that's not a knock on you guys. It's saying how much you guys grew. So what did Udo Dirkschneider bring as a producer versus Michael Wagner, which Michael Wagner's played a huge role in you guys being who you are? I mean, it's incredible. And I know Michael was at one point part of Accept. Is that right?
At the very beginning. He still can't play guitar, but he tried back then. Before we did Wiped Out, we were asked to do a Radio 1 session, which is like a big deal in England, right? For the Tommy Vance show. Again, Tommy Vance is this DJ who was like the only rock DJ pretty much, and he had this show every week, and that was like a real feather in our cap to be asked to do this. And it was a whole production with car crashes and nightmares and 300-mile drives in the fog and all this stuff. But when we got there, the studio was incredible. And we were like, oh my God, and we have to go back to that to do the next record. And it was like, that's it, but, and it was done, and we just said, next album, real producer, real studio, or we're out. So we made him fork out some money. Who do you want to do it with? We like this album, Breaker, by the band Accept. Sounds killer. Who's the producer? Dirk Steffels. We want him. And then when we found out Dirk Steffels really didn't do anything, all the work was Michael Wagner. Found out that at the time, Udo was like in and out of Accept, because all those guys did was fight. It was like crazy. And he said, oh, I'm going to be a producer. You know, so it's, they've got a Double Trouble Productions, and, you know, Udo's working with me. Like, yeah, great, whatever, bring him on. Maybe we can sing something. That would be fun. Ha, 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 you know, let's do it. So Udo could barely speak English, you know, so he'd make a comment now and again, and got mortal drunk on cognac before he sung the parts with me. So actual contribution, I don't know, but he definitely was in there having a good time with us. So that's for sure. But, you know, at the time, Michael was so far ahead of the curve. He was using these echo units and delay units, and he'd have a book of mathematics, and he'd make a room. He'd calculate the reflections based on the tempo of the song, and he'd have this rack of Lexicon PCM60s, like about 10 or 15 of them. Got the guy to rent them in. The guy from the studio, which was down in London, it was a job in studio called Pineapple. It was fine. It was great. It was a huge step up from where we'd been, you know. I mean, that's part of it. That's why it's got these crazy reverb sounds. It's like he built those literally from scratch. Now you know, within 2 or 3 years, you hit a button and it was all done for you. But, you know, he was so far ahead of the curve, he was doing this. But we actually did pre-production up in Newcastle. We had a room, and those two guys came up, and we sat for a week going over the songs, making sure the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted and had it all right.
Did Michael ever suggest any creative musical contributions? In other words, I know it's your music and etc., but as a producer, besides the engineering part and the technical part of the recording, which obviously is crucial, did Michael ever contribute anything creatively, like an arrangement-wise, or you know, a tempo in a song?
Yeah, there'd be the occasional arrangement thing. I actually found our original demos, which were done at the Neat Studios, and I was surprised at how close they were arrangement-wise to what we ended up with. But I remember the song "Run Silent, Run Deep," which has the chords da da, and originally we had it run silent. No, offset it. Da da, run silent, da, run. Yeah. So like the call and response thing. So things like that were huge. You know, it's just a little change, but it's a huge change. But I would say that, you know, 80% we had it locked pretty much. We were well rehearsed even before they came in, so the few changes were easy to assimilate. And we went down there, and it took maybe 16 days of, 16, 17-hour days. And we stayed in a guest house, and between the engineer and Michael, who always raced each other to the studio every day. You know, Michael had his 924 Porsche getting stopped by the cops, and hello, my name is Fritz. What is insurance? I don't know. Plain dumb, you know. And we had a wonderful time. We worked very hard, but had a wonderful time. We knew right off the bat this was a huge step forward. You know?
At that point, how many albums had Michael produced?
He's actually just put something up on Facebook with his production, so I'd have to look back. But he's got like a wall of album covers. Oh, so he'd done Dokken, done the first 1 or 2 Dokken. He'd done Great White, their first EP or their first album. Worked with Motley Crue, the first record. I believe he at least engineered that. So that him and Don Dokken came over to Los Angeles, and they were like stealing food to survive until he got their feet into the business, you know.
Who would ever thought of that now with his legendary producing career? It's amazing, right? Yeah, well, you have to start somewhere.
that's those stories, you know. People have big dreams and they do what it takes to get there. You know, that's what's pretty inspirational. There's usually a thread. There's very few people in this business and your business get there on a silver spoon.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Very few.
So the All for One, did you have the record deal with Megaforce when you recorded it, or you released it on Megaforce after you recorded it?
It was licensed by Megaforce from Neat.
Oh, from
So
Neat.
we did the record, and then, you know, we'd done a couple of shows, and Halloween 1982 was our first show in the States. We did like 3 or 4 other shows then, and then we came back to do a full headlining tour in 83 with the record.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yes. And so out of curiosity, I have to ask you, what's your favorite song off All for One, since so many people look at that as one of your landmarks of Raven's discography? What's your favorite song off that? My personal one, even though there's so many good ones, is Hung, Drawn, and Quartered. There's just like this frantic, crazy, psycho kind of killer energy to it. Which one is your favorite off that album?
It's tough because, I mean, over the years, I mean, we still play a lot off it. I mean, we facilitate between whatever new album we've got, but quite often we've opened with Take Control many, many times. It's such an instant. The first 3 seconds is like, yep, we're here. Boom, right in your face. So that, we love playing All for One, love playing Mind Over Metal. We've been having fun pulling out some of the different ones, like Hung, Drawn, and Quartered. Once Mike joined, let's do Hung, Drawn, and Quartered, and that's been a showcase. It's and we're playing it like, you know, 5 times faster, so it's even more fun. And we also worked up Seek and Destroy, which we hadn't played in like 35 years, and that was like the extra encore to push it over the top, because it's just that simple riff that's just so powerful, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's been great doing that too. Yeah, we'll screw around and bring the others out. So short answer is I don't know. It's a bit hard.
That's understandable. So I have a story to tell you in relation to that album. It's kind of silly, and you know how like something you might have in your past, you might find, I don't want to say embarrassing, but you're kind of like, oh, I used to do that. So I was in high school at that time when that album came out, and 2 of my buddies, Andrew Capella and Craig Van Ness, all heavy metal listeners, to the bone, since we were boys, coming up through, you know, Sabbath and Judas Priest and Nazareth and Boston, UFO. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Right.
So at that time, I remember we used to get together. We took these pieces of wood and we cut them out to look like guitars, but they actually weren't instruments, and they had no strings. And we'd paint them with all these weird designs, like kind of almost like a superhero. And we would get together. Now I remember that Kill 'Em All, Metallica's first album, I never heard it. I didn't even hear that band. And I remember your album came out 1 week after Kill 'Em All. And we bought both of them at the Tower Records. And I grew up in Seattle, Washington. So in Seattle, there's Tower Records was in the University of Washington section of town,
right,
which is a little bit northeast of Seattle by Lake Washington. And so I bought the Metallica album. None of us had ever heard them. The only reason why I bought it was because they were on Megaforce, which we were already listening to Manowar on Megaforce. We looked at the way they wrote their name and the titles, Seek and Destroy, Four Horsemen, etc. So then one of the other guys bought All for One, and that was back in the cassette times. So we would cassette tape for each other. And we immediately liked All for One. We immediately liked Kill 'Em All. So we would get together with these fake guitars, and we would act like we were air guitaring the entire album together.
Sure.
Yeah, we were all sitting there rocking out. And we even, this kind of relates to your new album, Metal City. My friend Andrew liked to draw comic books. So he drew comic characters of the 3 of us and gave us nicknames. So my friend Craig Van Ness was Craigadeth, and he played guitar in the comic. My friend Andrew was Andrew Taj, like Sabotage.
Right.
And then because I was going in the Army, they called me military on drums. And we were drawn as comic book characters, just like you guys were on your new album.
Oh, that's excellent. But we used to do the same thing when we were, you know, still are huge Slade fans. We'd get our tennis rackets out and jump around the house, and parents weren't in. And even when we started the band, we used to go to, showed you on the Cup, the Mayfair Ballroom. There was nowhere like it on earth. And I know that now from traveling around. And they'd have bands every Friday, sometimes on a Saturday, and they'd have the disco, and they'd play heavy metal songs, and everyone would air guitar and jump around like lunatics for 6 or 7 hours. You know, never seen anything like it. Yeah, so that was our rehearsal.
I gotta love that. And to me, that's something really cool about that, having that energy, because you guys have always captured that in your music. Now you went on this legendary tour with Metallica. Obviously, you were now bandmates on Megaforce. I unfortunately never got to see the show because you didn't go to Seattle on that tour. But, you know, looking back to that Kill 'Em All for One tour, had you heard Metallica's music before you started playing out with them?
No, we'd arranged the tour with John Z. Went off this, you know, great tour. We were all excited. Our first headline tour of the States. Wonderful. Got a great opening band for you. Oh yeah, it's the biggest band in San Francisco. We're like, nah. Journey, Y&T, nah. Sammy Hagar, nah, no way. And he's like, no, it's Metallica. We're like, who? Never heard of them. So a cassette came in the mail to check them out, and it was No Life to Leather. And put it on, and like, the speed rate on this? Seems like Motorhead at 78, you know. This will be fine. These guys are cool. So, you know, we met up with them at Johnny Z's house, watched them basically destroy it in 2 hours. And like, oh, this is going to be entertaining. So, you know, they were green. It was their first tour, but we all got on really well and had a hell of a time. And it was boot camp. There was 17 people with 2 trucks and a 6-berth Winnebago. And initially, the idiots that had put it together were like, well, you guys don't need hotels. You'll just sleep in the Winnebago. It's like, well, the Winnebago, you know, how they have the table that turns into a bed at the back. That got destroyed day one from Metallica slam dancing in the motorhome. So you're down 2 beds initially. Somehow mattresses appeared and they went in the backs of the trucks, and we actually spent half our time in the back of the truck on that whole tour. So you'd get out in New Mexico 110 degrees after sweating on a mattress for like 5 or 6 hours, you know.
So now out of the guys in that band, how did you personally connect at any one of them, or were all the same, whether it would be Lars, you know, Kirk, you know, James, God rest his soul, you know, the bass player that passed away, Jason, not Jason, why am I saying Jason?
Cliff
Burton. Yeah, so what, did you connect with any of those guys personally? Like,
well, we'd talk, we'd get on. I mean, you know, Lars was Lars. He's never changed. He's you know, always looking for the inside straight. He's the mover and shaker. You know, they have a character in England called a spiv, you know, like the wide boy that's like selling stolen goods on the corner. He's kind of like that. James was just happy and always drinking. Never said 2 words hardly. Kirk was kind of similar. He'd talk a bit more, but he was spacey, you know, surfer dude, you know, really. And then you had Cliff, who was like the old soul on Young Shoulders. So yeah, connected with Cliff. We'd sit and play bass ideas off each other, and you know, what kind of chord run, what kind of mode, what kind of scale, blah blah blah. But we all got on really well, which was you know, which is great. It makes a huge difference.
Now, no,
We'd
no,
all, I
when you
mean, we
got,
had to drag them out of bed most mornings. Literally, I remember Mark dragging Kirk down the stairs of a motel.
and, and I'm curious, when you guys were not playing, when you were just together, either, resting or traveling, in those situations, were you guys listening to metal? Or when you're
Yeah,
not playing metal, were you listening to something different just to have contrast?
no, we had, I had a case full of tapes. Lars had a ton of tapes. I remember they had a tape and it had The Rocker by Thin Lizzy, the long version. That was always on. What was Sabotage? It was the early thing was a song called City Beneath the Surface. There was a couple of songs by the Scottish band, the small Holocaust. Played a few of them, a few regular things, and I'd be playing whatever, Judas Priest, AC/DC, blah blah blah. Yes, Genesis, ELP, all the prog stuff too, and Rush. Cliff loved Rush. I mean, he lived in one pair of pants that had a Rush patch on one leg, and I think a Blue Oyster Cult or a Kiss one on the other.
When you guys got the deal with Atlantic Records, how far was that after you guys went on that tour? Was that something that happened before you released Live at the Inferno, the live album in '84?
It happened afterwards.
So how did that all come together? And looking back on that, talk about that. And one of my questions is having, we all have this Monday morning quarterback syndrome where we might have done something, we look back on it and said, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe we should have done this instead. I do that with my movies, somebody you might have cast, someone you put on a crew. When you look back to the Atlantic deal, was there anything you do differently now based on what happened? And I'm not saying there was anything bad. I'm just saying in retrospect.
Yeah, I'm sure there would be. I'm not a great fan of, like you say, Monday morning quarterbacking after the fact, but you tend, especially when you're young and naive like we were, and at the point basically living in another country on somebody else's dime, we're hanging out there. I mean, the thing was, in '84 we came over, cut ties with Neat, we took all our equipment out, and we got it shipped to the States, and me and my brother were married, but none of these things got in the way. We were ruthless to the point of ridiculousness. It's like, we're following our muse. This is where we go. We have to go and do this. So we came over, and the idea was to tour, get a major deal, get a major agency deal, and do that. Now, of course, proceedings were set in the way to get off Neat. And we knew once we got off Neat, they'd want to put out a greatest hits album. So it was like, well, when we tour, we're going to record and do a live record and beat them to it, which was, Live at the Inferno. And at the same time we were mixing that, we were in the studio doing the Stay Hard songs. We even did a couple of songs for a movie at the same time. We seemed to be in the studio forever at that point. We had a bunch of songs because initially one of the ideas was to give a record to Neat to get off the label. And they would say, well, we're not going to give them our best stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So we had a couple of like, and they were like, yeah, whatever. Stupid, but we did that. And then when we found out there was interest from Atlantic, it was like, all right, cut the crap, get rid of all this stuff, bring On and On, etc. back in. Let's do it right. And we recorded it with our live sound engineer, and it just wasn't sounding right. So we ended up bringing Michael Wagner over, and he saved the day. Yeah. The only pressure we had when we were nearly done was Atlantic wanted a redo of Hard Ride, which was an utterly pointless, exercise. But we're like, all right, whatever they want that, that's fine. So we did that. So I'm happy with that. What I wasn't happy with is being pushed and games being played for the following record, where it was like people leaning on you, like, in order to get from A to B, you've got to do XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so that's a whole different deal. But at that point, I mean, you know, we'd set our sights on doing this. We played this big show. I mean, we toured and we had Anthrax opening for us, which was a great tour. And then it was going to finish in New York. Rob had hurt his hand. We had to postpone stuff. We did a big show in Roseland in Manhattan, and it was us with Metallica and Anthrax opening. And it was sold out, and it was a huge deal because 3 independent bands back then, metal bands, selling out that venue was like unheard of, a huge thing. I mean, the back cover of Live at the Inferno, that's that show right at the end. You've got it there. And, you know, all 3 bands got signed.
Amazing.
Eventually. There was lots of screwing around. We got signed by the disco guy because the rock and roll guy was in rehab. So
wow.
that was a taste of things to come. People who had no idea about what we were doing.
To go to the next Atlantic record, you know, The Pack is Back. You recorded that at the famous Bearsville Studios with legendary producer Eddie Kramer, which, you know, the Beatles, David Bowie, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, just to name a few. So how did you get that high-profile producer? Was that the record label, or were you trying to reach outside and work with someone different than Michael?
It really came from the management. It was just like, you know, we want a name producer, blah, 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 blah. If we'd had our heads screwed on, we probably should have stuck with Michael.
Yes.
No slight to Eddie, who's a legend in his own right. But we had this concept of doing a high-tech heavy metal record. You know, part of the sound of the band is there's a large commercial aspect, and there's a large raucous, chaos, smash everything up aspect. Structure, chaos, melody, noise, all in balance. And this album, of course, was leaning way too far to the other way, you know. And, you know, Rob came up with some great songs, but some of the songs, like I'd say, I've got this song and I'm playing riffs, that's not a song. What do you mean? Well, we've got to start with a melody on vocals. I didn't write songs like that. That's not how I do it. But he'd come up with this stuff and went with it, and Eddie loved it and went with it. But Eddie's forte is recording a loud, raucous rock and roll band live in the studio, not doing a high-tech heavy metal album. So we all disappeared up each other's collective backsides for about 6 or 7 weeks recording this. And Rob decided he wanted to record to a click track by himself. So that sucked the life out of any of the fast stuff, because the push and pull between the guitar and drums was, you know, it's mandatory. It's instrumental in our sound. You can't just go bop, bop, bop. You know, it worked great on The Pack is Back and on Rock Dogs, but on some of the other songs, you know. And then, of course, the record company were, you know, make it more commercial, make it more commercial. You know, they thought we were Kiss meets Bon Jovi or some nonsense, you know. And, you know, we were young, stupid, naive, and like, oh, okay, yeah, great. And it came to a point, I think, during the mix where I'm thinking to myself, something's not right here. You know, I shouldn't be feeling like this about this. But, and to your point at the beginning, the only way you can get to where you are now is to go from where you were there.
That was really my next thing, and this relates also, of course, in the movie industry. What I can't possibly understand is the mindset of these corporate executives. They go scout for talent, they find a band like Raven, lots of energy, power, all-out live performance, and then they proceed to tone it down, turn it down, try to make a band like yourself more appealable with their, I hate to say it, limited mind of listening experience, especially with metal, for a larger audience. But to me, that's plain stupid, because it's like a lose-lose situation. If you turn down your guys' power and your kind of chaos, cross-train, wall-up stuff, that's going to turn off your loyal fans who've been with you from the beginning. And I don't really think it's going to attract a new audience. So it's kind of like these executives are so narrow-minded and so stupid because they don't know what they're talking about. They kind of destroy it for everybody. And I see that with the film industry. With the film industry, you take a guy like John Carpenter or George Romero or Toby Hooper, and then you take these guys that make these crazy, creative, amazing, independent films, and you try to make it corporate, business-like, cold, calculated. That's not the way you should do movies or music. Would you agree?
Totally. Totally. Like I say, we were young and naive, and the people that were working with us at the time, you know, it was their first rodeo too. It was John Z's first rodeo. It was Tony's first rodeo. So, you know, and you get blinded by the, as the Rush song says, the glittering prizes and all this. It's like, if you do this, we'll be able to do that. And they're just trying to push everyone through that. You know, we were definitely the square peg trying to be jammed through a round hole, because there was no way on a commercial level we were going to compete with, you know, the pretty boys that were coming out at that point. It's just not on the cards. And you got to play your strengths. And it took doing that record to say it's the greatest learning process we ever went through.
Have you ever thought of what maybe the albums would have been like if you stayed with Megaforce instead of the major? But I know your goal was the major label. But do you think they might have turned out any different if you just retained that kind of that kick-ass level you were at with All for One?
The thing that happened, I think, would have happened anyway, but because unless we'd had a giant breakthrough, once it got to like 86 into 87, music went,
yeah.
You were either glam or you were thrash. And we were really neither.
So I got to talk about your brother, because, you know, it wouldn't be right to have some sort of words about him. Your guitarist, Mark Gallagher. What does Mark bring to Raven's sound that might be different than what you bring? I'd find that very interesting. I know you've had different drummers over the years based on situation, whatever. But what do you both bring that's different? Maybe not the same, but what's different that John brings versus Mark?
Well, Mark's the riff king. I mean, I come up with a lot of cool riffs, but he's the riff king, and I'll work hard. I'll spend a lot of time doing stuff, and he'll just like waltz in, plug in, and go, and lightning in a bottle, you know? He's one of those guys, he's really one of those guys, like a Jimmy Page, like a Joe Perry, where there's sometimes, I mean, he's tighter than they are, to be honest. But, you know what I mean? It's like a spontaneity. That's what I'm getting at. That kind of guitar player where it's just like, where did that come from? And live, all the solos off the top of his head. Never plays the same solo twice.
I love
and that's how he does his thing. I mean, and that's what makes, and we had to, you know, that was kind of try to get dialed out of him, but he'll improvise all the way through once he's comfortable with it. And that's the magic. That's what brings that to it, you know. And when we play together, we're like two sides of the same coin. I don't play, you know, under what he does. I play a part that'll coexist and complement what he does, and all of a sudden it just sounds like one big instrument with lots more notes.
Wow.
That's the idea with that. So it's an orchestration thing, and that's really ever since we went as a three-piece. It was like, oh, I've got room to do this. He's playing that. Let me play the high harmony to it instead of the other way around. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's no guitarist more aggressive. I mean, I could fill a warehouse full of guitars that he's broken. That's for damn sure. On every show, 110% blood, literal blood. He'll put into it, you know.
Well, speaking of that, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly happened to him in 2001 where he had that serious accident? I heard it was a wall fell on him, but I didn't know the details. What happened actually with Mark then?
It was a crappy year, 2001. Our father died. We went over to England for the funeral. He flew back September 10th with his wife and got stuck in Canada for like 2 or 3 weeks at Gander. You know, that whole story. Came out of that, was going somewhere early morning. Some guy was driving with his lights off, T-boned him. He hit his head off the glass, a huge lump. and had to pay. Some guy owed him money. So he went to this, they were building a drugstore, Walgreens. He went there, and to let him on the site, he had to wear the hard hat. He couldn't because of the lumps, so he just had his baseball cap on. And he's looking for this guy, and it was very windy, and it blew his hat off. He went to get the hat, and it blew again. And he went to get the hat, and then the entire building fell down on top of his legs. And if he hadn't have had the head accident and the baseball cap, he would have died.
Wow.
The wind saved him because, it was a 30, 40-foot wall that was about 6 or 7 foot wide, and it wasn't braced properly. So it fell down, crushed his legs, broke both his ankles, turned both his feet the wrong way around. There was a piece of rebar through one calf. The other calf was ripped off altogether. And it was, he called me up on the phone, laughing hysterically. "What's the matter? The building fell on me." "Ha, ha, ha, ha. Oh, yeah, really? Yeah, really. Helicopter's coming for me right now. Talk to you later."
Holy crap.
And I'm like, "What's he been drinking?" So it was, he wasn't going to make the night. He wasn't going to get through the night. And then it was, they were going to have to amputate both his legs. And he says, "No." "We're going to have to amputate your left leg." "No." "You'll never walk again." "No." And we did some gigs in him in a wheelchair, like 3 years later. And it was rough. He played great, but he was sick. He just had an operation, was throwing up, because we just didn't know. And I just said, "Well," he says, "I'll beat this." I'm like, "Okay, I'll just write songs." He got a huge leg brace. 2005, we started doing a few festivals. We did one in England, one in Germany, one in Tampa, and he just had a big leg brace on and was great, made no difference. And within another 2 years, he was running around on stage, proved them all wrong.
I give him a lot of credit. And that, to me, that's a reflection of the attitude of Raven always, which is the Raven's like the underdog. You're not going to stop. You're going to reach your goal. I think that's so important for people to absorb that, to have that kind of positive, never say die attitude. I know I have it as a director because when I'm making a movie, I mean, literally everything's trying to sabotage you. You don't have the money. You don't have the time. People have attitudes, egos.
No, you can only rely upon yourself and your attitude to get through it.
Yeah, honestly, John, one of my favorite movies is The Terminator. And I saw it when it first came back in '84. And one of the things I've always kind of adapted to my attitude is I have to be almost like the Terminator. I've got to do everything I can and not let anything stop me. Because believe me, everything will try to stop you. Right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've had to, whatever we've got by and large has been from our own efforts. Wow. No one's greased the way for us, put it that way. It's always been, so, the whole 9 yards, you've got, it's our name on it. You've got to be in control. So, you write the songs, you arrange the songs, you write the lyrics, you sing it, you play it, you get it recorded, you mix it, you master it, you do the artwork, the whole process. And then live, you go out and you present yourselves in a manner where, you want to make an entertaining show. You want people to remember what you do. And we have that, whether it's 100 or 70,000 people, and we've played the both. So
I've never had the privilege of seeing you guys live, and not because I wouldn't want to. Our schedules and locations have never lined up yet. I'm hoping to see that one day. I'm in New York. I'm on Long Island. I'm not far from the city. If you guys ever play here coming up, you got to let me know, because I've never.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been a Raven fan since 40 years. I got to see it. And I don't mean to jump over all the albums in between, just in the case of time. I'm trying to be, good for the show. Just as a couple comments before we get to your last few albums, I think over the years there were some real underrated albums a lot of people may not have heard that they should definitely take a chance to listen to. I thought that Architect of Fear. I thought some aspects of Glow. Um, Everything Louder, One for All, Walk Through Fire. They all have little pieces that really stand out that people should look at. But to kind of jump forward just to get closer to the end of the show, I really thought when Extermination came out, and if I'm not incorrect, did Michael work on that with you guys recording that?
No.
Okay. Well, I thought that album and of course the new album, Metal City, you hit back a big, something happened where you guys got that back, the chemistry, the sound, the songs, it all hooked together like it did with All for One. What would you say about my feeling that?
Yeah, I mean, basically after Mark getting back from his accident, it was like, we want to do a record. It's been a long time, we got to do it right. And we did Walk Through Fire, and it was like planting a flag. Okay, here we are. Could it be better? Yeah, but there's some really good songs, good sound, played well, does the job. So we learned from that. We did Extermination. We worked longer on the pre-production, worked longer on the writing stage. Had a lot of songs, came together. Great, really good record.
That Bon Scott song, I love the lyrics of that. If you listen to that, that's so creatively done to encapsulate the work that Bon did in AC/DC. That was awesome the way you did that.
That was great fun. Mark he says, I've got this riff, Bon Scott tribute. Absolutely. We don't want to just do an AC/DC song. Let's do it right. And he had Thunder Down Under, great title. And I just went, it wrote itself, So you just got to put all the song titles and all the words and, Rosie and whatever. And it just wrote itself.
That was brilliant.
As the best songs do. So that was fun. And also the last track, the one that was sung in our accents, Malice and Jody Land, those lyrics are hilarious. But they would have to be written out properly and translated for you to understand them. But they are very funny. And I had a lot of fun doing that too. So we had that, and it was like, okay, the next record, I know we can up our game again. We just have to learn the lessons we did with the previous one, with the arrangements and writing, and get to the quick and have interesting stuff, to offset that. And we toured a lot on Extermination, a lot of touring, and then Joe had his heart attack. 2 days before, we had basically about 15 shows coming up all over the place.
And he had been in the band for so many years.
Oh yeah, I mean that was his basically his 30th year with the band. He'd been with us forever. And to be honest, he was growing tired of it. He didn't want to be out on the road. 2 days before all these dates started, and we're like, well, we're not cancelling. Talked to him the next day. He's doing all right. I says, well, look, we're getting guys in to fill in. Just get well, do your thing. A friend of ours, Tom Hazard, who works with David Elfson, got us some guys. Got this guy in Chicago. We booked rehearsal time because we hadn't played in 6 months. So go to Chicago, 4 hours rehearsal. This guy, Jimmy Mess, it's great. Did a show, awesome. No stress, wonderful. And then we came to do 3 shows. We did Jersey, we did Baltimore and Delaware, and had this guy, Mike Heller. He's been playing with Fear Factory, whatever. So we get there, we meet him, we talk for half an hour, we go on stage and play the gig. And it's perfect.
Wow.
And we're looking at each other. All 3 of us are looking at each other like, this sounds freaking good. And Mark's like, why did you play that like that? And he goes, well, that's what's on the record. I goes, oh, don't play like the record. Play looser, play faster. Really? I can do that? Yeah. So the next night's 1,000% better.
Wow.
And then the next night's 1,000% better again. Well, like, he couldn't do the other stuff. But like, let's talk when we get back from Europe. So he went off, did a festival in Sweden, did an 11-date European tour with different guys who were great. But we had that connection with Mike. We got back, like, we've got all this stuff lined up. Are you in? Yeah, I'm in.
Wow.
And so that was probably June of 2017. We did 150 gigs the rest of that year. And he recorded all the drums for the record, because we had all the songs already done. We actually were in the studio doing an abortive session, which didn't work out yet, scrap it. But it was a busy year, that in 2018, busy.
Now, how did you bring Michael back in the fold?
Well, after this abortive thing, we said, well, Mike Heller was moving to Los Angeles. He's going to build his studio out there. Like, okay, well, when you build the studio, we'll go out there and record the record. Perfect, And we did the Monsters of Rock cruise in January 2018. And Michael was on the cruise. So we're hanging out, having dinner, and Mark's like, would you be interested in mixing our new record when we get it done? Oh, yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Okay, cool, wonderful. So I get a phone call about a week or two after the cruise, and it's Michael, and he says, when are you going to have the recording done? I says, well, he's not going to have his studio ready for like another 3 months. Not going to be ready. He goes, well, I'm having a major operation, full-on heart surgery. I say, oh, great. Why don't you come and do it at my place?
Wow.
So 2 days later, we were all in Nashville.
Wow.
And that's where we did the guitars and the bass and the vocals.
By the way, I have to say thank you for you guys allowing your song to be in my movie, my latest psychological thriller, Double Vision, which won Best Thriller in January last year. And it won the Top Audience Award just back in November. It was weird when I was putting that movie together. I very much like to surprise people with twists, not just story-wise or plot-wise, but the way I cast actors, certain characters you would expect to be somebody you would not expect to be something different. I like to flip that. And it's all done very naturally. And it all relates to what I think Hitchcock did so well, where he killed the lead character right off the bat.
Like the first scene of the movie.
Yeah. So I like to take you off your feet. And so when I was thinking about the scene in my movie that I used your song with, I had a scene with a yoga instructor who's this kind of slight brunette actress that ended up playing the part. And I thought, instead of playing like this kind of quiet, meditative yoga music, I want to have heavy metal. So that's how I went with you guys. And she had other scenes too, where I'd play other heavy metal songs as well. So I have to thank you guys. And it was an honor for me to have something of yours in my work. You know what I mean?
No, that's brilliant. And the way you describe how you do your work, it's, you want to give people familiarity up to a point, just so they know where they are.
Yes.
Okay, we're orientated. And then you hit them on the head.
I think Metal City is really powerful. It's got a great sound.
No, we just wanted to, we knew we had great songs. We'd written a lot of songs. This was condensed out of like 45 songs. Crazy. And they were all good. And we're saying, wow. So we could pre-sequence the album. What would be a great opening track? This one. Yeah, but I like the power. That would be great. Okay, that's power. And then, you sequence it properly, take people on a journey, as it were, This is an album that stands tall with anything we've ever done, if not better. And we're extremely happy about that. The initial mix wasn't happening, so we had to farm that out. And we got this guy, Zeus, who did a wonderful job of keeping the old school feel, but having a modern production without it sounding gimmicky and stupid like a lot of new stuff does,
Good.
And then the artwork took forever, but it was worth it because it looks really cool. It was a lot of fun to do.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I appreciate it. I'm really a huge fan of Raven, and I respect you guys, admire you guys. I actually kind of, you might think this is silly, but I've kind of looked at the way you used to adapt the athletic rock, which, may sound like a gimmicky or trendy name or something like that. But what I liked about that, if you think of it in terms of, living a style of life, I've tried to bring almost like an athletic rock to filmmaking, and I don't mean by wearing, you know, baseball cap and stuff like that.
Thank God
But-
for that.
Right, but I try to keep myself in great shape. I don't drink or smoke or do drugs. So I've always considered myself an athletic filmmaker because it takes that kind of physicality to make movies. I'm sure it's similar being a musician, right?
Yeah, I mean, all those other things that people get lost in, they're just distractions. Hard work and graft and, you know, elbow grease that goes in to make something happen. Sometimes people don't appreciate that. And it's any kind of creative endeavor like that, it's extremely satisfying. Even if no one ever heard it or saw it, you just say, this didn't exist, and now it does. That's kind of what we lost in that one period. If I like it and I really like it, other people will come along for the ride.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, John. Say hello to Mark and the rest of the band there, and just know that you're legendary. The band's legendary. You've got a lot of fans. When I posted, I was putting this up, so many people contacted me saying, hell yes, they wanted to hear you talk about your career. And thank you for coming into depths with me.
That's right. Well, legendary. That means we're old as fuck, but it doesn't matter because we still kick ass.
That's right, both of us. Have a great day, my friend.
Thank you, man. Take care.